Welcome to the Stop Down Photography Podcast, episode 16. I'm your host, Scott Davenport, and today's topic, facing your biggest photo burden. Hi everyone, welcome. Thanks for joining me today. Hope you've had a good week since the last episode. Today, we're going to talk about burden, the burdens that we feel with photography. But don't despair, this is not going to be a heavyweight episode. I know sometimes the episode titles, they might be, I don't know, maybe they bias a little bit toward negative. Certainly the word burden doesn't sound fun. So we're going to talk about some burdens, but we'll also talk about some ways to face them and work through them. Because I'm not here to make you feel down or make you feel sad, but in order to get through some stuff that's difficult for us or a burden for us, well, we got to talk about it, right? So, a few episodes ago, I asked a question: what is your biggest burden with photography? What's the part of the photographic process that's just a pain in the butt for you? Your photo albatross, if you will. The albatross thing, it's a reference to the rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. The stanza from the poem is, "Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung." And this is a psychological burden that a sailor on this ship carries. He had shot an albatross, and then the ship went from having wonderful sailing experience to dire straits. People are dying of thirst, and he attributes these bad fortunes to his actions. When he killed the albatross, the wind's cut down, the ship is left adrift. And I think it's a good parallel to some of the mental burdens that every photographer can carry. Our photo burdens aren't as tragic as the Ancient Mariner, for sure. But there are things in our photography that just aren't our favorite to deal with, or there are decisions we need to make that weigh heavy upon us. So I asked you to share what your biggest photo burden is, and thank you to everyone that responded, shared their thoughts. I wanted to highlight 2 replies in this podcast because of how different they are, and put in the context of a photo workflow. These examples are at quite opposite ends of the spectrum. The first is from Stelios. He's a member of the Patreon community, so Stelios, thank you very much for supporting the show. Now, he is a wildlife landscape photographer. He works with Nikon DSLRs and is currently shooting with an APS-C sensor, so a crop sensor body. Healthy set of Nikon glass in his kit, most of which are DX lenses. So in Nikon terms, a DX lens is a lens made for a crop sensor camera. Stelios has reached a point in his photography where he wants to move to full frame. His art needs to steer in that direction, and he also wants to go mirrorless. A new full frame body, new full frame lenses, that starts to become a big investment. And looking at the Nikon offerings in the mirrorless space, there's the Z6, the Z7, and they're just not ticking all the feature boxes for Stelios. So he has this burden of, I want to move beyond my current gear, but I may need to move to not only a full frame body, which means new full frame lenses, but an entire new ecosystem of a camera, which is another dimension of unfamiliarity. And all that gets circled around and gets stuck in a holding pattern. So his albatross is this string of DX lenses hanging around his neck, not wanting to lose the investment in that, but wanting to move forward, the uncertainty of a new ecosystem. So a lot of things going on there, and we get stuck, right? So I have some thoughts about this. Maybe this will help you out, Stelios. It's a tough problem. I went through a very similar migration, although on a much smaller scale, maybe about 5 years ago. I used to shoot with a Nikon D7000. It's a crop body, but I had a very small set of lenses. I had 3 lenses, and one of them was the kit lens. So my glass investment was small. So when I did make the move to mirrorless, I ended up going to Sony in full frame. I was able to do basically a complete replacement. It was a little costly up front, but I was able to recoup a lot of that cost by then selling off the older body. And most of the lenses, I think I only have 1 lens left, which I think has a street value of maybe $50, so it really wasn't worth the effort to go and try and sell it. So that might be something to go look at, if because there are adapters for DX lenses. I mean, yes, it'll be a DX adapter, and it'll appear as a cropped photo on a full frame body. But over time, if you're able to have an adapter, use your DX lenses, get the body, maybe one full frame lens first, and then start selling off other gear to fund the newer purchases, it might give you a migration path. So that may be a path forward. Food for thought. I wanted to share that. The second story of burden comes from Ron. Now, Ron is like a cross-trainer photographer, photograph everything, landscapes, portraits, still life. He enjoys it all. His challenge is on the post-processing side, so the back end of the photographic process. What I found interesting about Ron's story is the view he has of post-processing. It's one I hadn't really considered before. So he's well-versed in Lightroom and Photoshop, processes with intent, knows what he's going for with a photo, and reaches a quote-unquote finished state. And that's where the doubt creeps in. And this is where Ron's burden comes in. The photo is digitally complete and sits there, and he wonders, can I do better? Can I change this? Can I tweak that? The interesting description Ron had of a post-processed on-screen work versus a print. So he sees the print as a finished work. There's satisfaction in the job. It's tangible. It's physical. This is done. Whereas the on-screen image is incomplete. It can be tweaked. It can be refined. It's almost taunting and begging you from this computer screen to be worked on some more. I hadn't thought about processing that way, where the digital version of the photo is never really done and you can continue working on it until the end of time. So confidence in post-processing and knowing when your art is done, that's Ron's albatross. So I have a few thoughts about this one that, Ron, I hope this gives you a perspective to look at things, and maybe it'll help you decide when a job is done, whether it's a print or whether it's an on-screen work. Now, the first one is the question, is the printed work really the finished work? The example I want to give you is Ansel Adams and his photo Moonrise Hernandez. Now, as Adams reprinted that photo over the years, over and over, the outcome, the print, got vastly different. It really got moodier and moodier and darker as the years went by. Same negative, same original source, but his tastes obviously changed, and that was reflected in the prints. There's an interesting article that talks about it. I'll put a link in the show notes. And some of these differences, are really drastic. You'll be surprised how different the two printed works look. So the printed work may not really be the finished work. It's a finished work at a point in time. Now, the second thought about the photo not really being done when you've done the digital processing, that's something I've wrestled with too, and actually talked about it just a couple of weeks ago in episode 14. Now, sometimes we need to put something away, let it sit, and come back to it. The other thought about that is maybe it's not done, or maybe you learn a new processing technique, or the tools get better. Like you've got a photo that's got some noise in it, and then the noise reduction algorithms get better. Go ahead and go back to it. One of the wonderful things that we have in post-processing tools is the ability to make virtual copies or versions of our photos, so we can process them in many different ways. I guess a basic example would be color versus black and white. You can just make a virtual copy, do a bunch of different things to it, keep your original one. It's a way that you can measure your skills over time. It may be that you just want to have a different expression of the same source, the same photo, like Moonrise Hernandez and Ansel Adams. So I think it's totally fine to go back and reprocess, but maybe keep what you did initially. After the initial period of let it sit, go back to it, tweak, you think it's finished, just let that one be and create a new version of it and go ahead and process it differently if you so desire. A third thought about this burden of uncertainty, not knowing if the work is done. If you haven't listened to episode 4 of this podcast, go listen to it. I'll call it the George Harrison episode. In short, it's your art, and you get to decide when it's done. Hearing Ron's and Stelios' stories about their burden put my own in context in a couple of ways. One, it was a reminder of how unique each photographer's journey is, and at the same time, how we all face similar challenges, maybe just at different points along the way, or one stage of photography may be easy for one photographer and much more difficult for another, and then vice versa farther down the line. The second is thinking on a spectrum of a photo workflow. My burden is somewhere in the middle. My albatross is with field work. Part of my field work involves capturing video to share on YouTube. As a photo educator, I want to capture a location in the camera for a great photo to teach from, but also the surround, why certain approaches to a scene are working for me versus others. So I have this psychological tug of war every time I go out to capture photos between enjoying the outing versus capturing content for a good field video. As I've done more and more work on YouTube, I want to improve the quality of my videos. I want more establishing shots, more camera angles, close-ups, B-roll, and as an educator, capturing the in-field interview of why I'm making certain choices with the camera settings or the composition, all of those things. And I really enjoy putting these videos together. And in editing, I always wish I'd captured more field footage. I could tell a better story and give a more complete experience of that outing. But leading up to the shoot, thinking about all the extra gear I'll need to bring, how safe will the second and sometimes third cameras be while I'm capturing that behind the scenes footage, the extra tripods, microphones, wiring, the seemingly uncountable number of batteries for all these various devices. It's a mental hurdle I have to jump every time. And my quote unquote solution is every few outings or so I do just for me. No filming gear, no extra tripods, no microphones. Just go out with my camera gear and I do the work for myself. The catch, after the fact, I wish I'd captured some footage for a video. And that's an albatross I haven't quite freed from my neck. You can join in this conversation if you've got a particular photo burden you're carrying. Visit stopdownpodcast.com, leave a comment, or if you want to keep it private, there's a contact form. The messages come directly to me. I'd love to hear your story, what your burden is. Maybe I've got a thought or two that can then help you out. Sometimes just expressing it to another person helps you get through it. Hit the show notes. There's a link to stopdownpodcast.com, and I'd love to hear from you. I want to thank all the supporters on Patreon. These are the folks that have stepped forward and said, yes, we want this podcast to continue, and I cannot express my gratitude enough. It is your support that keeps the podcast on the air and is helping thousands of other photographers enjoy photography. If you're interested in learning more about the patron community, check the show notes. There's also a support the show button on all the pages of stopdownpodcast.com where you can learn more. That will wrap up this week's episode. If you're carrying a photo burden, I hope this episode lets you know you're not alone. We all have them. They change, they morph over time, and talking through them, even just expressing them to another photographer, can help you work through it. I do hope that whatever your photo burden is, you can face it, find a path forward. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please tell a friend. Rate and review it in Apple Podcasts or whatever device and app you're using. You can always find episodes anywhere you get your podcasts. And until next time, my name is Scott Davenport. Have fun.